Hello and welcome to episode 2 of this very special mini-series, Post-Covid Confidence Booster. I've got a special guest joining me in a moment, and today we're talking about women in leadership, what's in store for them for the future, and why aren't women speaking up enough? Well, I have experienced this in my speaking business, and also as a producer at the BBC, I know that we had issues for many, many years getting women to be the spokespeople. But today I am delighted to be joined by a very special guest, Anne Taylor, who is also an author. We've both written a book. I'm going to give us a quick plug. Anne Taylor's book is Soft Skills, Hard Results. Hello, Anne Taylor. How are you?
Good, Esther. Great to see you again.
Thank you. We've both got each other's books. Mine is Goodbye Glossophobia. So we will put them in the link below afterwards. Now, Anne Taylor is an executive coach, and she has worked with hundreds of leaders. And in her former life, before she became an executive coach, you've worked for multinational organizations, haven't you, Anne?
Yes, very big organizations, Procter & Gamble, and my most latest one was Nestle in Switzerland.
Absolutely. And I know that you've worked with women and men, but today we are talking about women. Next episode, we're talking about the gender gap, but today we're talking about women in leadership of the future and why women aren't getting their voices heard. Now, Do you find that is that your experience, Anne?
Interestingly enough, last night I was co-leading a webinar or event on storytelling for a small organization, and there were 16 women in the event and 2 men. So we sent them into breakout rooms to work on the first exercise. They came back together at the end of that exercise, and as we're going through the debrief, we asked, who wants to share their experience from that exercise? And who do you think actually raised their hands and offered their experience? The 2 men were the first to contribute. And it wasn't because they were more aggressive or they were pushy. They actually left space, and there was a little bit of a silence, and they stepped in and filled it. The other 16 women didn't, unfortunately.
Oh dear, no!
It makes me so frustrated.
It's funny though, because quite often if I'm speaking to an auditorium, say with 100 women, and maybe there's 8 men, and the 8 men might be the senior management team because they've sponsored the event. Quite often I find that the men feel that, it's quite a good forum for them to show off a bit.
I'm not sure if that was going on last night or not. My sense was there was more reluctance on the women's part of speaking up. And that's when I kind of get frustrated and want to call these women forth. They all had great experience, really unique stories. They did the exercise in the breakout rooms. They would have had an experience of that they could have shared. So I find they're holding themselves back rather than the men keeping them out.
Now, Anne, I've got to say, we first met a few years back when at the beginning of my business, when I set it up after I left the BBC, and I was a very nervous speaker. That's why I wrote my book, Goodbye Glossophobia. Glossophobia is a fear of public speaking. I wrote that book because I found it excruciating to have the spotlight on me and to be the person standing up in front of the audience. And I've learned to deal with it, and I've learned by doing it and doing it again and doing it again. And I've also talked to myself and talked around my self-doubt. You can do this. It's okay. You can try it. You can fail. And then I've failed a few times. But it's taken quite a lot of work to get over that. And I know that a lot of women don't like the sensation of having the spotlight on them. Sometimes people push back when I say women don't have as much confidence as men sometimes to stand up and get their voice heard. People say, look, it's equal. What are you talking about? Women don't need to be fixed. And yet I used to feel like that. I used to feel afraid in front of a large audience. So what are your tips, Anne? What are we going to do about it?
The first tip I have is essentially chapter 1 in my book, which is chapter 4 in your book. In your book, you call it Be You-ish. In my book, I call it It Starts With You. The only person you can change is yourself. So the first thing I say to people is notice what you say to yourself when you stop yourself from speaking. I'm sure everyone's been in a meeting where they've said nothing, and then all of a sudden someone else in the meeting says exactly what they were thinking. And you kind of go, oh, That's what I was thinking. I could have said it. So what were the words that you were telling yourself beforehand that had you stop vocalizing? That's the first thing to see. What's the script?
And
then
what do you think that script might be?
often it's, oh, I've got nothing to say, or who's going to listen to me? Or really, most of the time, it's the fear of looking stupid, of saying something wrong or making a mistake.
A lot of
Sometimes you
people
might.
say, I'm afraid of looking a fool. I'm afraid of looking a fool. That's one of the main ones that I hear. Okay, so we need to get rid of that script.
Yeah.
And then what's the next tip?
The next tip is to practice speaking up, sharing your opinion with other people. And it could be around the dinner table at home. It can be when you're in a shop talking to a shopkeeper. It could be in meetings or work situations where you feel a high degree of safety. It might be with colleagues that you really like and respect or have worked with a long time. So practice putting your point of view forward. Another tip to get people to do that is the good old Post-it note. Especially now, we're doing so much virtually, so much on Zoom. You can stick a Post-it note. You've got the prop right there. You can stick a
I've been doing it all morning.
You're an expert. Just write, speak up, or share my point of view, and post it on your monitor to remind yourself to behave differently than what you've done in the past.
And do you find that works? Do you put Post-it notes for yourself?
Definitely. I've got a couple up right now.
Normally people write eyes and teeth by the camera lens to remind them to smile at the camera. That's a good reminder too. So I think that's a really good tip, is sharing your opinion or sharing your stories in a safe environment. And it's got to be safe, not somebody that you feel judged by. And vocalizing and speaking out and physically saying the words, physically telling the story is practice. You don't have to be in an auditorium or on camera in a live Zoom event in order to be practicing. So that's a really good tip. Get your opinion out there. Practice talking in a safe environment. That is a fantastic tip. So next time we meet, Anne, what are we going to be talking about?
We're going to talk about the gender gap and COVID-19.
So this is part of a mini-series, Post-COVID Confidence Booster. Thank you for joining us, and tune in for episode 3 with Anne Taylor and myself, both authors and experts that can help you have more confidence.